What should you do while your boss is away from the office? What should you do while your boss is away from the office? And I've got 5 tips for you this morning. The first is, of course, don't do any work. If anyone asks you to do something, just say that you need the boss's input, and so that'll have to wait. Number 2, catch up on all your social media admin. You know, tons has happened on Facebook. You need to update your Twitter bio or upload those Instagram photos from the weekend. Today's the day. Number 3, take the world's longest lunch break. And don't just spend your time eating. You know, feel free to run errands, to shop, to get that 3-hour haircut. Number 4, entertain your co-workers. You aren't the only one who wants to slack off while your boss is away. Go have a chat and hang out. Or finally, if all of that sounds like too much work, just take the day off. Take a sick day. Why go into the office at all? You could be watching the latest Netflix or lying at the beach. What should you do while your boss is away? Well, that is what today's gospel reading is about. What should you do while Jesus, the boss, is away? As you'll see in your Bibles, and it'll be really helpful to have that open in front of you this morning. As you'll see, Jesus begins speaking actually right at the beginning of chapter 4, and this is a part of a much longer, broader section. So he begins speaking from chapter 24, verse 4, and he doesn't end until the end of chapter 25. It's one long section. In the first half of chapter 24, he says that he's going to be going away. Jesus will be going away, but he will return. And then in the rest of chapters 24 and 25, we've got 5 different illustrations on how to live while he is away. What should we do while he is away? So there's the story of the thief coming in the night. And Jesus' point is, live being ready so you won't be surprised when he returns. Or there's the story about the 2 servants. And Jesus' point is, live as those who'll have to give an account for how they've lived. Last week we looked at the third little illustration, the parable of the 10 virgins, where Jesus' point is, live as those who know that Jesus' return might be long delayed. And this week, the 4th of 5 illustrations, the parable of the bags of gold. And I think Jesus' point is, live as those who are commissioned to actively grow Jesus' assets. Live as those commissioned to actively grow Jesus' assets, even while he is away. The parable is in 3 sections. There's the assigning, the activity, and the assessment. The assigning, the activity, and the assessment. So first, the assigning. Have a look, verses 14 to 15. Jesus says, again, it'll be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. Jesus is using imagery which would have been pretty familiar to his first century hearers. There's a master, and this master has 3 servants. And when this master goes away, he entrusts his wealth to his servants to look after. And it turns out that this master is actually extremely wealthy. He's got 8 bags of gold. You'll see in the footnote, if you can see that there, it says that that's translating the Greek word talent, and that a talent was worth about 20 years worth of wages for a laborer. So, I don't know, in Australia, should we say 20 times 50,000? About $1 million, right? So the master's got $8 million that he splits up between his 3 servants, each according to their ability, 5 to 1, 3 to the next, and 1 to the last. And he goes off. Part 1, the assigning. Part 2, the activity. The question is, what do they do while the boss is away? Verses 16 to 18. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one who had 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. See, the first two, they get their share, and what do? They get straight to work, and they grow their master's assets. The one starts with 5, grows it to 10. The other starts with 2, grows it to 4. Doing so, I take it would have involved hard, committed work, right? If you were given $5 million, growing that to 10 is going to involve a lot of sweat and tears, risk and strategy. But the third servant, in comparison, does, well, nothing. He just takes the bag of gold and buries it in the ground. While the other two are out there working hard to grow the master's assets, he's doing his social media admin. He's taking a long lunch break. He's sitting on the beach. Well, the third part of the story is the accounting, and as you can see, it's the longest, most detailed part of the story. Verse 19, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I've gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. You see, the master might have been gone a long time, but he does finally return. And when he does, he settles accounts, as you would expect. How have they gone, growing his wealth while he's been away? So the first servant comes, and he's doubled the master's wealth. And the master, you can see, is overjoyed. He commends him. Well done, good and faithful servant. He says he's going to get a promotion. You've been faithful in a little. I'm going to put you in charge of tons. And then an invitation. Come and share the master's happiness. Pop the champagne. Let's celebrate. The man with the 2 bags, similarly, and he gets exactly the same response from the master, doesn't he? Word for word, exactly the same. And then the man who had received 1 bag of gold comes. Verse 24. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. So yeah, we don't know what this servant did, but one thing he obviously did do is he came up with a good excuse. If you've been doing nothing at work, one thing you do need when the boss comes back is an excuse. And his excuse is that he was scared of the master. He thought the master was a hard man, and so he would just hide it. But that excuse actually won't hold any water. It backfires on him. Verse 26, his master replied, you wicked, lazy servant, so you knew that I harvest where I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered seed. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return, I would have received it back with interest. Do you see the logic there? If this servant really, knew that his master cared so much about growing his wealth, if he knew that actually is what the master cared about, then he would have known that he didn't want it back in exactly the same amount that he gave it to him. Of course not. At the very least, he should have put it on deposit and got some interest. But he couldn't even be bothered to do that for his master. You see, it's an excuse, but it doesn't actually hold any water. And so the master's assessment is right. That while the other servants were good and faithful, this one was wicked and lazy. And so, verse 28, so take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Does that sound harsh? I take it that's what would happen today in our context too, in a similar kind of way. I mean, imagine that you had a business and you handed over, say, a division of your business for someone else to run, to a manager. And then imagine at the end of the year, when it came time for your kind of annual assessments, the manager said, "Oh, look, what I did with the business is I just sold the assets, put it all into a kind of current account, and here's the exact value of the business." What would happen to that manager? You're fired, right? Because of course the point is to be growing the business, to be maximizing the business's profits. To just do nothing is actually simply to be lazy. Well, I trust you can see how this parable fits into what Jesus is talking about. The master who goes away on a long journey is, of course, like Jesus himself. Jesus has said that he will be going away. And like the master in the story, Jesus cares very much that his assets are grown, even while he is away. Right now, he's out of the office. The boss is away. But he does care that his assets are grown in the meantime. The servants, of course, are like different Christians, entrusted with different things to do in Jesus' absence. And so, what will we do? How should we work while the boss is away? And what Jesus doesn't want us to do is do nothing, to simply check our social media accounts, catch a tan on the beach. See, he wants us to be hard at work, growing his assets. What are Jesus' assets, though, that we're meant to be growing? What are these assets? I think that perhaps the most simple way to answer that is that the answer is the church. See, what belongs to Jesus that he cares greatly about growing? I take it the most simple answer is the church. Not these physical buildings, of course, but Christians, disciples, men and women and children who know and love and trust Jesus. See, here in the parable, there's a master who goes away and gives his slaves a commission to grow his assets. Does that remind you of anything? Well, at the end of Matthew's Gospel, the risen Jesus is going into heaven, and he gives his disciples a commission. We call it the Great Commission, to go and make disciples of all nations. To go and grow his assets, to make disciples, to grow his church. And he's entrusted to us the means of making that grow, hasn't he? He's entrusted to us the knowledge of the gospel. The church grows as people come to hear about Jesus as Lord and Savior and come to put their trust in him. And that's how the church grows, isn't it? Now, of course, just as in the parable, the way that the servants are given different amounts, we're all given different opportunities, aren't we, for growing the church. The point isn't to feel discouraged because you're not a Pete or a Judith. See, it's not about what we're given, 5 talents or 1, but it's what will we do with what we have been given. It's not about how much are we given, but what will we do with what we have been given. Jesus has given us the knowledge of the gospel, and he wants us to take that and to make it grow, to see the gospel, the church grow. And he wants us to be actively, passionately, energetically, strategically growing the church. See, is it possible that we might be like people who while the boss is away, check Facebook, take long lunch breaks, catch up on Netflix on the couch, instead of growing Jesus' assets? Is it possible that we might devote ourselves to growing our own assets? Our reputation, or our comfort, or our bank balances, or our experiences, instead of growing Jesus' assets? Is it possible that we might come here to church, but never actually grow the church? That we might be church goers and not church growers? Well, we're going to apply this in a second. Before we do, you might have an objection. Because you might be thinking, spending my time, my energy to actively grow Jesus' assets, to grow the church, that sounds like slavery. I don't want to serve another master. Frankly, I don't want to work for another boss. I want to be my own boss. Well, if that's you, I'd like to say to you that actually serving this master, serving Jesus, is the only way to true freedom. You see, working for yourself, working for your wealth or your comfort or your reputation or whatever else it may be, that actually is slavery. Those things will do nothing but enslave you. But this master Jesus, what does he do? In the very next chapter of Matthew, this master gives himself to be betrayed, to be mock-tried, to be hung on a cross, and to endure hell. This master becomes the lowest servant to rescue us from our slavery to our sins and death. That is the Master Jesus, who comes to serve, to give his life as a ransom for all, and who says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." See, it is only in serving this master that we will find true freedom and rest. And if you haven't, may I urge you, do. Come to him. And what about for those of us who have? If we have come to Jesus, if we do call him our master, I take it that this parable contains, as so many of Jesus' parables, both a warning and an encouragement. There is a real serious warning, isn't there? Against taking what we've received from Jesus, our knowledge of the gospel, and bearing it. Of doing nothing to grow the church. And Jesus thinks that is something very serious indeed. But those who do that show that they actually have no part in him, and so will have no part in his kingdom. That they will be thrown outside. It is a serious warning. But I take it it's also a great encouragement. That those who do actively work to grow the church will receive his commendation, will be welcomed in to share his kingdom and his joy. It doesn't matter how much you've been given, but what you do with that. It'll mean different things for each of us, I guess. We might start off just by trying to have meaningful conversations over morning tea, mightn't we? How could we serve each other, to build up each other, to grow each other over morning tea? It might mean beginning to pray more. Praying for the growth of the church, for God to give you opportunities, for friends and family members, for colleagues, for those working overseas in mission. It might mean being more intentional with those that you do already know, with those at the mums group or the school drop-off or your colleagues at work. For some of us, growing Jesus' assets might mean working less so that we can be around to disciple our kids or to attend a growth group or make it to church on a Sunday. For some of us, it might mean working more. That we can be salt and light in our workplaces or that we can give more to grow the church. Now, we've got Christmas coming up. How might we be intentional about using Christmas to grow the church? Are there people we could be inviting to one of our 4 services here to come and hear the gospel about Jesus? Could we use opportunities in conversations to speak about the Christ at the heart of Christmas? How might we energetically, actively, risk-takingly, strategically grow the church? And have Jesus say to you on that last day, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Well done. Come and share your master's happiness."